This is Coaching with the Bible for July 28th, 2023. Totally kidding. That's not how we start this thing. And welcome back to another episode of Coaching with the Bible. This is episode 150, season 3, episode 41. Second portion of the book known as Deuteronomy, portion known as Ve'et Hanan. Our topic this week on reading between the lines, nonverbal communication. That's right, this is episode 150, which means that for 150 weeks in a row, you have listened to this voice talk and learn and teach and wonder and discuss all kinds of subjects from all kinds of places that are on some level, in some way, rooted in the Bible each and every week. And thank you for listening to me each and every week. I hope you're gaining something. I hope you're learning. This is week 150, just, I think, an accomplishment of some sort. And the topic this week on reading between the lines is super important. Nonverbal communication is literally almost everything. The research says that 93% of communication is nonverbal. And that words only account for 7% of it. That's the 7% of that 100. Body language is 55%. And tone of voice is actually 30%, which is why I started the way I started today. Because the tone of voice coming into something, and how something is said, and the way it's said, intonation, is crucial for understanding and appreciating what it is that's being said. So nonverbal communication, reading between the lines, reading the room, all the things that are not said, that need to be understood, to be learned, to be an effective leader. The source of it in the Bible is the following thing. In the Bible, the 10 Commandments are given twice. The first time they're given at Sinai, and the tablets. Moses then breaks the tablets. And so when he goes back up, they write a second set of tablets. And the way that the text reads in the Bible is that in each version of the 10 Commandments, some of the text changes. However, there's a problem. There's a statement that's written in the Talmud that when the commandment of the Sabbath was given in the 10 Commandments, in the first set of tablets, it says that you should remember. And in the second set of tablets, it says that you should be watchful, or you should keep the Sabbath. Those are not the same word. In the Hebrew, they're definitely not the same. Sometimes in the translations into English, be mindful and careful of it. They do translate it the same way, but it's not the same. And the statement in the Talmud is that when God shared this with the people, they were said at exactly the same time. So remember and keep were said at exactly the same time. Now, that's not something that we can do. We can't say two things at exactly the same time. And it's very hard to understand what does it mean exactly that they're said exactly at the same time. And the commentaries throughout the centuries have tried to explain what that statement means. And it's hard to have the tablets change in the language from one set to the next set. And so we have to come up with some sort of an explanation. So I'm going a little longer than usual on the Bible side of the Coaching with the Bible, but give me a little bit of leeway here for a second, which is this. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who was a giant and a leader and a generational leader in the Jewish community in the 20th century, in his book on the weekly portion, in his commentary on the weekly portion, says the following. He says that we know that there's an idea in the Talmud and in tradition that we have things that are written a certain way but said a different way. And what that means is that sometimes a word will be written in the text one way and it'll be pronounced a different way. There's a whole host of these examples in the Bible. And sometimes that there's even differently where in more so in the prophets and other places where there are, letters that are missing in the works, but we read them a certain way. A great example in the Hebrew and a lot of places is when the word Jerusalem is said in Hebrew, which is Yerushalayim. When they're written out, when that word is written out in the Hebrew, it's actually short one letter. The second to last letter in the Hebrew, which is the letter Yud, it's the 10th letter in the Hebrew alphabet, is, I think, almost every time that word appears in the text, missing. But we pronounce it as such. So Rabbi Kamenetsky writes that what happens in the tablets is this, is that they're both written. Both terms are written. So the term to remember in Hebrew, which is zachor, and the term to keep, which is shamor, they're both written in the tablets, both times. It is in the first occasion where one is pronounced out loud, and it is on the second occasion when the second is pronounced out loud. And so you have things that are written and not said and not written. It's a mind-blowing concept. The interpretation that I'd like to use here is the sense that there are things that are written which are not said, and there are things that are said which are not written. And you have to read between the lines sometimes to figure out what it means. All of biblical commentary is effectively trying to read between the lines of the story to try to understand the stories, to try to really make sense of things that sometimes don't make sense. So reading between the lines, reading the room, the nonverbals. And so the question becomes as a leader is to, how do you do this and how well do you do this? And it's on both sides. One is how you communicate without words, and then how you read other people with respect to the things that they're not saying. So not the words that they say, but everything else. Peter Drucker, it's a famous quote, which is, the most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't said. Super important. Ralph Waldo Emerson has a great quote also, which I think is even more powerful. Your actions speak so loud, I can't hear what you say. Right? The nonverbal sometimes gets in the way of the verbal. You can't hear because of the way the person is saying. You can imagine a person is giving a speech and their hands are moving at nonstop speed in front of them as they're speaking. So you can imagine it like their hands are in a whirl while they're speaking. So their voice is steady, let's say, even if that's even possible. Their voice is steady, their intonations are there, but their hands are a whirlwind in front of them. It would be very hard to pay attention to the words being said, the message being given, for all the nonverbals that are getting in the way, all the actions that are getting in the way. And so we have to appreciate that this is two-sided. How does the leader communicate? Obviously, verbally is super important, but also non-verbally. And then on the other side is, how does the leader interpret and understand the nonverbals of the people that are around them? This makes someone a much greater leader. So take, for example, a situation as follows. You're conducting an interview of somebody, someone's looking for a position at your company, on your team, and they come into the room, their resume reads like gold. So on paper, they got everything. Educational background, work experience, success, amazing recommendations, all that other stuff. They come into the room and they sit down and they don't say anything. And their shoulders are slumped and their clothing is wrinkled and messy. Their hair is all over the place. And they're missing a lens in their glasses. You didn't even shake their hand. But what's what's going on in that room. Like, you're looking at this and you're thinking, this interview's over. There's no chance this person's getting a job unless the job is for being a clown. It's over. So the nonverbal said everything. Sometimes it is a handshake. So a person gives you sort of a wilting handshake and you're sort of like, discomforted by the nature of that handshake. It gives you a sense about what that is. Person doesn't look you in the eye throughout the entire conversation. They're looking all over the place other than at you directly. So even if they're saying the right things, you're distracted perhaps by that. And you're not able to focus on what's going on, but your impression, your objective reading of it is that this person is not focused, can't look at you. Like, there's something that's perhaps off about what's going on in there. So for all the verbals, the person is saying all the right things, they're getting it entirely wrong every time. And so we have to sort of think about, like, what's going on, right? How do we do that? How do we approach this as the leader on one side of it, and then someone on the other side of that in terms of their experience? There are a lot of dimensions to nonverbals. Just to give you an example, I saw an article on LinkedIn that discussed 5 dimensions of nonverbal communication. So the most obvious is what's called the pre-verbal. Pre-verbal, in terms of the nonverbal communications, is that relates to the facial expressions, posture, gestures, right? That's the most obvious one. That's the one we know. It's just I never had a term for it before. But pre-verbal. Here's another example of one of the dimensions called periverbal. Periverbal deals with and focuses on the distance that people place between each other when they're communicating. So a person walks into a room and, let's say it's a team meeting and everyone else is sitting around the table and this person takes a chair, pulls the chair back away from the table, puts it in a corner. Now that tells you something, right? They're uncomfortable, something's off, they're not feeling right. That kind of a vibe. The person is giving off a sense about themselves and the space that they're looking to create and keep from everybody else in the room. So there are a lot of ways to appreciate and understand the nonverbals. It's important that we learn how to read the gestures of the other people and to read our own gestures. So let's start there, first of all. When we're talking about ourselves and how we want to be viewed from the nonverbal standpoint, how do we get better as a leader in our nonverbal? So the first thing is obviously just to be aware of it, but how do you get aware of it if you can't see it? So if you're coaching someone, you're working with someone, you're trying to help someone get better at this, so even a video analysis of them is a great way to do it. Just record the person in different interactions. How do they handle themselves in a meeting room? How are they handling themselves in a one-on-one conversation? How do they handle themselves at a, like a team event or team party, stuff like that. And then they're speaking and they're interacting, their eye contact, their hand gestures, their physical proximity to other people, like all those things to assess how that person's doing it as a leader. The second thing to do is really getting feedback from others. Asking people like directly, how am I in that room? What's my experience? What's your experience of me in that room? So if they say to you, every time you walk into the room and sit down in the meeting room, you have your arms crossed over you, or your head is in your hand and your eyes are closed, like you're getting a pretty good picture immediately of the nonverbals and what you're saying without saying it in that room. If you're the leader and you're leading a meeting and you're on your laptop answering emails and text messages from other people, taking phone calls in that conversation or in that meeting, so then you're not present. And so the nonverbals you're giving off are that you don't care, you're not interested, what everyone else has to say is not important, and you're really not there. And so all that is giving off a vibe. And imagine then the person is considering joining your team, and this is the information that they get about you as a leader, is that so-and-so is not present when we're doing these meetings. And so how do you flip that over is, working on listening skills, taking away the distractions in the room, right? There's a lot of things that one can do to get better at it, and it can be measured. Be measured as to how you can go from a 0 to a 3. Let's say 3 is the highest level in a meeting room, and 0 is the lowest, by simply making a couple of changes, by obviously being intentional about some activity. But all these things do work. Obviously, you can work with someone one-on-one, and you can play, you can do role playing and practicing to appreciate where that person is as a leader and where they need to be as a leader, and do that work together so that the person can get better at their presence in the room vis-a-vis others. Paying better attention, obviously, is important. Some sense of empathy, communication. If you're asking open-ended questions, even if the questions, it's perhaps less important even as to what the questions are that you're asking as a leader to everyone on the team, but the fact that you are focused on asking questions for the purpose of listening and gaining a better understanding, again, forget about the verbal for a second. The nonverbal messages that you're sending, that people are receiving from you, are that you're there, you're focused, you're interested, you're paying attention, you're present all the time. And so training to become a better leader is certainly possible. And we can work on it, and we can become better at it. Now, on the flip side of that is appreciating the nonverbals coming from everybody else. How do you do that? How do you read that room? So you walk into the room, you're the CEO of the company, you're the team leader, it's Monday morning, and the team meeting is set to begin. You walk into the room. So if you just walk into the room and you launch into your presentation, you're not paying attention. If you walk into the room and you sit down like I just described before, and you're giving off the vibe that you're not interested, but you're there only because you have to be there, so then, again, same idea. But how do we do this better? So an article, I think it was in Positive Psychology magazine, online, or similar, I forget exactly which one. So first things first, walk into the room, pay close attention to the people. This is from Annie McKee. Annie McKee wrote a book called How to Be Better at Work. Makes sense. How to Be Better at Work. So first thing that she says is pay close attention to the people. And not just what they're saying, but again, how they're saying it. Number 2 is do a quick scan of the people. So paying attention is one. Do a quick scan of the individuals, noting where everybody is sitting, noting how everyone is giving off their energy, their vibe, their feeling in that morning, who's smiling, who's standing, who's sitting, how much space they're giving between who looks tired, who looks disheveled, who looks sad, who looks upset, who's not paying attention. And then the third is picking up on even being like super hyper vigilantly observant of micro expressions, facial expressions, raised eyebrows, small smiles, little frowns. Like, you're the leader in that room. If you're the leader in that room, or you are a leader in that room, whether you lead from the front or you lead from the back or you lead from the middle, doesn't matter. Being able to pick up on all this makes you a better leader. Appreciating someone frowning or raising their eyebrows even if they're looking down and they're not listening to it doesn't appear that they're paying attention to what's being said, but they heard what you said and their reaction was a quick, raise of the eyebrows and then back. Picking up on that, noting it, and then maybe coming back to it later is really valuable and important. But you can't just simply read the room and that's the end of it. That's valuable for the room itself while the room is going on, and to continue to check to see what's going on, right? When you check on it and then afterward you follow up, Professor McGee writes that, let's say you notice that expression, that micro frown of a person on the announcement that you're cutting salaries by 10%, whatever it is. Following up and checking in on that person afterward, saying, during the meeting when I made that announcement, I observed the following, the story I'm telling myself about your expression is about your feelings is X. Do I have that right? So one, the person knows that you noticed. 2, they see that you care because you're checking, and you want to make sure that you want to not just validate what you experience, you want to make sure that you have it right. And 3, you want to work on it. So you want to fix if there's something negative there, then you want to work on it. So similar situation. Let's say you announce that you're rearranging the offices on the team, or something happens at home, and you tell your children you're not going on vacation, and there's a reaction, of course. So like read the room, read the reactions, figure out how do you observe what's going on in their body language, in their posture. You want to, in another article I read, you want to even, if you can, you really want to read the emotional energy that people are giving off. And sometimes it's so strong, like a person's presence in a room is so much that it gives us so much energy, probably in the negative, that either as a leader you want to tone it down, you want to understand it. There's a lot that goes on, like that. For example, let's say there's someone on the team who makes everyone else uncomfortable. Around certain subjects, you know that like a storm is coming out of that person. So like when that person comes into the room, you see everyone sort of, even the most hesitant, slight shift back away from the table, away from that person is going to get you, all kinds of looks and all kinds of stress and all kinds of pain. This is, the norm. This is what we experience. This is how we go about our business. This is what we can work on. This is how we can get better at it. So the nonverbals, that which is not said, that which is not written, are super important. In an environment like ours today, when a lot of our interactions are, communicated without voice and without, being in the presence of people through communication lines like a text message, so then we lose the emotional content of it. We lose the nonverbals, and all we get are the words. And so how do we read those, right? And so take an example. You ask someone a question in a text message, and they write back N-O. They write back no. So what do a lot of people do? They read into it. If it's all caps, if it's in bold, if it's all lowercase, if it has an exclamation point at the end, they're trying to read between the lines, to read for what's not there, to appreciate and to understand fully what that message is. So sometimes people write nope as opposed to no, because they want to get maybe the lighter intonation or understanding of the word. Or they want to write yep as opposed to yes, exclamation point, to read it a certain way and not another way. So we're losing some of that communication. If we do a lot of our work on Zoom or in Zoom environments, right? This is not a commercial for Zoom, but some sort of virtual video calling environment. So we have to appreciate that maybe there's new distance and we have to handle ourselves differently, and we interact physically differently in that environment, and the nonverbal therefore is different in that environment than it is if we're in the presence of somebody. Some people are great when they're inside the room with other people. And some people are great in a virtual environment. And some people are great in both. But we have to learn ourselves and learn how we operate in those different environments, in those different spaces, because as things continue to go and to grow, we need to learn how to change and adapt for all these different new environments. So if it's standing in front of a room and making a presentation, how we go about that, how we move in the room, how we interact with other people in the room, hostile, friendly, welcoming, funny, sad, angry, all that comes out. Intonations of the voice, high, medium, low, question, exclamation point, all those things are a factor in our nonverbals. And what's great about it is that we can always work on it, we can always improve, we can always get better. And to finish off with a quote, this is an anonymous quote. I do not know the source of it, but I did see it online, which I thought was great. In the realm of communication, words are merely the tip of the iceberg. Delve deeper, and you'll find the wealth of meaning hidden in the nuances of nonverbal expression. That is Coaching with the Bible for this week, episode 150. Thank you, as always, for being with me each and every week. I hope you learned something this week. See you next week.